They will try to tell you what you can't do. They will project their fears onto your future, sharpened by their regrets and shackled by their comfort zones. Not because they see you clearly, but because your ambition reflects the courage they buried. And when you dare to rise, to dream, to defy the gravity of mediocrity, they call it unrealistic. But understand this, doubt is not your enemy. Doubt is the architect of your inner fortress, if you know how to use it. If you know how to convert it, alchemize it, discipline it. The greatest minds in history stood on the battlefield of doubt and did not retreat. They built their legacies brick by brick from the very stones others threw at them. Edison failed 10,000 times before the world saw light. Lincoln lost elections, buried his children, suffered depression so deep it was called melancholy. Yet he carved his name into the conscience of a nation. Disney was fired for lacking imagination. Ford was told horses were faster. The common thread was not brilliance. It was belief, not in magic, in method, not in ease, in endurance. To build a mental fortress against doubt, you must first face its voice, not run from it, not bury it, not numb it. You must listen to understand, then override it, not with noise, but with clarity. Because clarity is the cornerstone of mental strength. You cannot withstand the storms if you don't know why you're standing in the rain. Clarity is not a mood, it's a mission. It's knowing what you stand for when everything around you tells you to sit down. You cannot build resilience on sand. You must build it on a foundation of purpose so solid that even failure becomes fuel. The world whispers limitation. Your mind must roar back with intention. That is how mental fortresses are formed, not in moments of comfort, but in crucibles of pressure. And every time you choose discipline over distraction, purpose over pleasure, growth over comfort, you lay another brick. Your thoughts are the blueprints. Your habits, the labor. Your vision, the architect. The world is not designed to reward the passive. It is designed to respond to the persistent. You are not here to merely exist. You are here to expand, to evolve, to express the full force of your spirit in motion. But you cannot do that while doubting the very power that breathes through you. Belief is the gatekeeper. It is the sentry on the walls of your mental fortress, and belief is not something you wait for. It is something you build, daily, ruthlessly, relentlessly. You must protect the borders of your mind like a king guards his kingdom, because what you allow in will eventually come out, and every small doubt entertained is a crack in your foundation, a leak in your mental armor. So you must inspect your thoughts with the vigilance of a general preparing for war, because you are at war with comfort, with fear, with the inner critic that wants you quiet, small, compliant. But you were not born for quiet. You were born for conquest, not of others, of yourself. And in that conquest you will meet the shadows of your mind, the voices that say you're not ready, you're not good enough. Who do you think you are? Good. Let them speak. Because every empire built, every breakthrough made, began with a voice that said you can't, and a will that answered, watch me. This is the internal dialogue of the mentally fortified. They don't silence doubt, they dominate it. They don't wait for permission, they move in purpose. And they don't negotiate with fear, they convert it into fire. Because fear is not the end, it's the signal that you're on the edge of evolution, that you are leaving the known and entering the territory where transformation happens, but only if you proceed. You do not need certainty to begin, you need courage. Certainty is the reward of those who dare to begin without it. This is the modern war of mind and will, and to win it you must train daily. Like Hill taught, whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe it can achieve, but the mind must be conditioned, fed with the right thoughts, starved of poison, rewired if needed. That is your responsibility, because the mind left unattended will always default to fear, always retreat to safety, always surrender to doubt. The default setting of the average mind is survival, but you were not designed for average. You were born to create, to lead, to shape reality with the force of unwavering belief. To do that you need more than motivation. You need mental architecture. You need the steel beams of discipline, the fortified gates of self-respect. the unshakable core of clarity and consistency. So ask yourself, are you building a sanctuary or a prison in your mind? Do your thoughts free you or chain you? Because every belief you adopt becomes a building block. Every choice either reinforces your strength or weakens your walls, and you do not rise by accident, you rise by design. There is no magic formula. There is only this: know what you want, decide what you're willing to do for it, and then do it, without excuse, without apology, without delay. This is not theory. This is architecture. This is the framework of giants, the design of those who leave their mark, not because they had no fear, but because they refused to let fear have the final word. You are not here to tiptoe through life, praying not to disturb the doubts of others. You are here to move boldly, to act decisively, to choose conviction over convenience, again and again and again, until the walls around your mind are so reinforced, so impenetrable, that doubt can do nothing but knock and be ignored. And when doubt knocks, because it will, you meet it not with hesitation, but with history. The history of your effort, the evidence of your consistency, the memory of every time you kept going when you had every reason to quit. This is how warriors think. This is how empires are built. Not in one grand gesture, but in quiet, defiant steps taken in the dark before the world believes. You must become that kind of force. Because the truth is, no one hands you belief. No one downloads courage into your soul. It is forged in discomfort, in silence, in the moments no one sees. It is built in the way you show up when nothing is working, when the vision is blurred by fatigue, when the goal is mocked by setbacks. That is when the fortress begins to rise. Too many wait for the right mood, for motivation, for certainty. But if Lincoln waited for the world to understand him, if Edison waited for the critics to approve, if Hill waited for permission to share his philosophy, nothing would have changed. The world doesn't need more people who wait. It needs people who decide to believe, to act, to become. Because belief, once chosen and fed with discipline, becomes identity, and identity is power. When you say, "This is who I am," you are declaring war on doubt. You are drawing a line between the old self that questioned, wavered, hesitated, and the new self that executes, adapts, and endures. But identity must be earned. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be faked. You cannot perform your way into power. You must become it. And becoming requires pressure. Think of steel refined by fire. Think of diamonds, formed in the depths under crushing weight. Think of the greats, not born into strength, but molded by resistance. So why do we resist the very conditions that build us? Because the mind, when untrained, sees pain as punishment. But the mind trained in purpose sees pain as permission. Permission to grow, to push, to evolve, to build walls higher, foundations deeper, roots wider. You want to build a mental fortress? Then stop asking life to be easy. Start asking for the strength to carry the weight. Because weight is how muscle is built, mental muscle too. And every time you resist the temptation to fold, to hide, to self-sabotage, you prove to yourself that you are not your past. You are not your doubts. You are not the voice that says this is too much. You are the one who stays. You are the one who builds anyway. This is the silent revolution of the modern mind. No banners, no applause. Just the daily defiance of a soul that refuses to bow to fear. Understand, the mind you build becomes the life you live, and the opposite of doubt is not arrogance. It's alignment. Alignment with your values, your truth, your purpose. When you align with something greater than your fear, you walk with conviction. You move with certainty. And from that state, you do not seek validation. You create outcomes. This is what the great builders of thought understood. Carnegie did not wait for people to see him as a titan. He became one by investing in vision before anyone else did. Hill did not write because it was easy. He wrote because he knew truth must be spoken, even when the world is deaf to it. So what are you waiting for? You have the tools. You have the breath. You have the pain, the fire, the doubt, and all of it can be used, transmuted, alchemized, into discipline, into drive, into destiny. But only if you act, the fortress will not build itself. It responds to every brick you lay, every morning you rise early, every distraction you reject, every excuse you crush with commitment. There is no external reward that can match the internal power of knowing, I am becoming unstoppable. Not because you feel like it, because you chose it. The fortress becomes real the moment you stop treating your potential like a suggestion and start treating it like a command. You don't need more information. You need execution. You don't need more opinions. You need inner silence. You don't need more likes, followers, praise. You need solitude, structure, and a steel spine, because this is not a popularity contest. It's a legacy. And your legacy will not be built by moments of convenience. It will be built by what you did when it was hard, when no one clapped, when you had to clap for yourself. That's when the foundation is formed. That's when you earn your identity. And once you earn it, no one can take it from you. That is the fortress. It is not external. It is internal. It is not built on bravado. It is built on belief, and belief is a choice. So choose it. Choose to become unshakable. Not because you've never been broken, but because you rebuilt stronger every time. Choose to rise not for applause, but because you know the ground no longer fits your ambition. Choose the mission over the mood, the calling over the comfort, the war over the wish, because the mind that is trained to fight for itself will never again be held hostage by the opinions of others. You are that mind. You are that force. You are the builder, the architect, the warrior, and the fortress is rising. And as your fortress rises, so does your standard, not just in how you work, but in how you think, how you speak to yourself, how you move through the world. Because the mentally fortified don't walk with arrogance, they walk with alignment, with an inner quiet that says, I know who I am. I know what I'm here to do. They don't need noise. They don't chase validation. They are grounded, not in certainty, but in responsibility. Responsibility for their energy, for their focus, for the outcomes they create. They do not blame the world. They do not wait for the weather of life to change. They become the storm. This is how you claim sovereignty over the mind. And it starts with the discipline to control what you consume. Every scroll, every conversation, every distraction is either reinforcing your fortress or weakening it. And the undisciplined mind is not free. It is a puppet pulled by invisible strings of dopamine and doubt. So you must become the gatekeeper of your focus, ruthlessly. Because in a world addicted to noise, clarity is rebellion. Turn off the opinions. Turn off the endless feed of other people's highlight reels. Get still, not to escape, but to hear yourself think again, to remember your vision, your mission, your voice. This is not romantic. This is war, and your focus is the front line. Because clarity without focus is a sword you never swing, and you must swing daily, intentionally, with precision. Because doubt thrives in the fog, in distraction, in chaos. But the moment you clear the fog with structured, deliberate action, doubt fades. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't need to. You just become louder than it. You become more consistent than it, more committed. You overpower it, not by force, but by proof. Proof that you keep showing up. Proof that you do what you say you will do. Proof that your vision is not some vague hope, but a practiced, lived, executed reality. And that proof creates momentum. Momentum, the most sacred asset of the warrior mind. Because when you have momentum, you don't need hype. You don't need convincing. You move forward by force of habit, by rhythm, by internal alignment with your purpose. That is the heartbeat of your fortress. And yes, there will be days when the momentum slows, when setbacks punch harder than expected, when progress feels invisible. That's where most people fall, not because they failed, but because they forgot. They forgot who they are. They forgot why they started. They forgot that the blueprint of their vision was never promised to be easy. It was promised to be worth it. So you must build rituals that remind you, daily anchors of identity, a morning of clarity, an evening of reflection, a practice of writing your goals, speaking your truth, visualizing your outcome, not for motivation but for maintenance, because power decays when neglected, and your mind, like a fortress, will crumble in silence if not maintained. You must keep the fires burning, the focus sharpened, the walls reinforced. You must sharpen yourself, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and sharpening doesn't always feel good, but it always produces strength. That's why the strong don't chase ease. They chase growth, because the sharpest steel is not formed in still water. It is pounded, folded, tempered, and so are you. Every hardship, every delay, every closed door, an invitation to become more, to reinforce the walls of your mind with new layers of resilience, patience, adaptability. Adaptability, the silent weapon of every fortified mind, because those who endure are not the most intelligent or the most talented, they are the most flexible. When the storm hits, they do not break, they bend, they adapt, they adjust the sails without abandoning the destination. This is not about being rigid in method. This is about being relentless in mission. And when the plan fails, the mission doesn't, because the mission is not external. It is not a job title or a bank balance. It is an internal compass, a fire that cannot be extinguished by circumstance. That fire is your responsibility to protect, and it burns brightest when you stop asking if you're ready and start declaring, I was made for this. Not because the road is easy, but because I am becoming equal to the road. Every challenge, I meet it with clarity. Every setback, I meet it with strategy. Every doubt, I meet it with evidence. This is the language of the fortified. They don't speak in wishful thinking. They speak in decision, and decision is power. It is the spiritual sword that cuts through hesitation. It is how you collapse the space between where you are and where you're meant to be. Decide to believe. Decide to act. Decide to evolve. Because evolution is not passive. It is a war of decisions, stacked daily in favor of your highest self. And in that war there will be casualties, old habits, old identities, old beliefs. Let them die. They are not who you are. They are who you used to be. And you do not owe loyalty to patterns that keep you small. The future does not belong to the familiar. It belongs to the fortified. And the fortified do not flinch. They do not fold. They do not wait for perfect conditions. They build in the rain. They rise in the dark. They train when no one is watching, because they know the world sees the fortress only after you've built it, and by then it's too late for doubt to stop you. So what do you do when the world doesn't applaud? You build anyway, because fortresses are not constructed for applause. They are constructed for protection, for presence, for purpose. They are monuments to the part of you that kept going, not the part that was celebrated. The mind that waits for the world's permission will rot in place, but the mind that moves from inner truth, that rises from its own conviction, that mind cannot be bought, broken, or buried. That is the essence of power. Silent, consistent, relentless. Do you think Carnegie paused every time someone laughed at his ambition? Do you think Ford rewrote his dream every time someone said impossible? Do you think Oprah, beaten down by rejection and trauma, waited for the world to accept her before she built her empire? They outlasted doubt. They didn't just fight it once, they fought it every morning. Every doubt was a test, every setback, a crucible, every insult, a challenge to prove the vision real. This is what no one tells you about greatness. It's earned in isolation. Not when the cameras are on, but when they're off. When you're tired. When the bank account's low. When your friends don't get it. When your family says play it safe. When the voice in your head screams, what if this doesn't work? That's the moment, the defining threshold, where average turns back and the uncommon becomes forged. That's when your choices become sacred. Because every time you keep going, every time you speak life over your dream, you harden your mental armor. You reinforce the gates. You elevate your threshold for resistance. And resistance is a gift, if you know how to bear it. Look around. Most people aren't mentally weak because they lack intelligence. They're weak because they've never trained themselves to sit in the fire without fleeing. But that fire, that's where leadership is born. That's where you learn to love the discipline. to crave the challenge, to stop asking for the pain to end and start asking what it's making you into. Because transformation doesn't happen when things feel good. It happens when things are uncertain. That's why the fortified mind embraces discomfort. Not because it's easy, but because they know what's on the other side. And the other side isn't comfort, it's command. The ability to command yourself, to dictate your mood, to master your habits, to rule over your emotional state like a disciplined monarch, not a slave to every passing feeling. You are not your moods. You are not your past. You are the architect of your next move, and your next move must be made with deliberate energy. You cannot afford to be casual in the way you speak to yourself. Your inner voice is either reinforcing your fortress or cracking its walls. So when the old stories come up, the stories that say I'm not enough, I've failed too many times, I don't have what it takes, you respond, not with shame but with strength. You meet that story with action, not a scream, not a post, not a promise, a decision. And then you act. You get up, you study, you train, you invest, you build. Because self-respect is earned every time you follow through on what you said you would do, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. This is what mental sovereignty feels like. You stop chasing feelings and start chasing alignment. You don't beg for motivation. You build systems. You don't wait for passion. You move with purpose. You don't fear failure. You extract the lesson. That's the mind of a builder. That's the inner fortress. And no amount of doubt, rejection, betrayal, or loss can break what you've built through daily defiance of weakness. It becomes who you are, unbothered, unshaken, unstoppable. Because true power is quiet. It doesn't need to be loud. It radiates. And when you radiate belief, you no longer need to persuade others to see your vision. They feel it. They feel it in your presence, in your words, in your follow-through. You become the evidence, not just for them, for yourself. Because let's be honest, the biggest doubter isn't out there. It's you. It's the part of you that still flinches when it gets hard. That still questions when things get quiet. That still waits for guarantees. But no great life was built on guarantees. Greatness is built on risked identity. The courage to put your current self on the line, to risk failure, embarrassment, even ridicule, for a version of you that no one can see yet but you. And when you do that, when you act in faith, not sight, you earn the rarest currency on this planet, self-trust, the kind that says I can count on me. And that trust, that's the core of the fortress. That's the difference between a castle built on ego and a kingdom built on character. So ask yourself right now, what does my mind default to when I feel pressure? What story plays when I feel fear? What identity activates when I face resistance? Because you are not the words on your vision board. You are the pattern you repeat under pressure. And if you want to build a mind that cannot be broken, you must become the pattern of power. Not once, every day, every moment, in the small unseen decisions that either sculpt the mind of a giant or steal from it. And know the world won't always reward it right away, but that doesn't matter, because when your internal world is fortified, your external world will follow, eventually, inevitably, unavoidably, because no storm can shake the one who has already become the mountain. So stop asking for the mountain to move. Become the mountain. Become the one that doesn't bend with every gust of criticism, that doesn't shrink in the presence of louder voices, that doesn't dissolve when the spotlight turns away, because what you're building isn't fragile, it's not delicate, it's not made for approval, it's made for impact. You weren't meant to chase every passing trend, bend to every new opinion, or apologize for your intensity. You were meant to stand in your convictions, to lead with unwavering purpose, to speak with the weight of someone who's been through the fire and didn't run from it, but rose from it. The world doesn't remember those who followed the crowd. It remembers the few who walked alone, lit only by the fire of their own belief. And when you walk that path, you'll lose people. You'll lose comfort. You'll lose the illusion of safety. But in its place, you'll gain something far more powerful. Clarity. Clarity that cuts through the noise. Clarity that tells you where to go when the map is torn and the trail is buried. Clarity that reminds you you are not lost, you are building in silence. And in that silence, doubt may visit, but it does not reside, because silence becomes strength when you learn to listen not to the world, but to yourself, not the version of you shaped by failure, but the version calling from the future, the version already standing at the summit, whispering back, keep climbing, it's worth it. That voice is real, and you've heard it before, in the moments right before you almost gave up, in the quiet after another door slammed shut, in the stillness of knowing that, despite everything, you're still here, and that voice doesn't yell, it doesn't plead, it doesn't bargain, it simply knows. And your job, the daily mission of a fortified mind, is to trust that voice more than you trust the fear, more than the failure, more than the critics who couldn't see what you were building because they were too busy doubting what they could become. You are not here to convince them. You are here to complete the work. And the work is sacred, not because it's big or public or glamorous. It's sacred because it is yours. No one else can build your fortress. No one else can carve your name into the legacy you were born to create, but you must choose it. You must wake up every day and reclaim your mind from the forces trying to hijack it. You must drown out the echo of every you can't with 1,000 steps forward. You must honor the promise you made to your future self, even when the present tests your limits, because this isn't just about success. It's about sovereignty. It's about rising above the mental noise and becoming something unshakable, because when your mind becomes fortified, when you are rooted, disciplined, clear, and decisive, no loss can unmake you. You may fall, but you will never stay down. You may bend, but you will never break. You may doubt, but you will never dwell in it, because you have built something no one can take away, a mind that obeys purpose, not panic. And in a world built on reaction, a mind rooted in response is revolutionary. So keep building. Stack your bricks with intention. Protect your rituals like sacred ground. Starve your distractions. Feed your focus. Speak life over your vision when no one else sees it. Sharpen your thinking until doubt becomes the background noise to your execution. Study, not just for knowledge, but for clarity. Train, not just your body, but your patience. Discipline, not just your schedule, but your identity. Because fortresses are not built in weekends. They're built in lifetimes. And every time you want to quit, every time you think it's not worth it, remind yourself, this moment is the brick, this struggle is the mortar, this breath, this thought, this decision, it is part of the legacy. You are not building for applause. You are building for alignment. And when the structure is finished, when your habits, your beliefs, your actions all support the same vision, you will be immovable. You will become the standard others rise to meet. You will become the storm they cannot shake. You will become the one who endures, not because you had all the answers, but because you refused to abandon the mission. This is how mental fortresses are built, not in theory, but in discipline, not in inspiration, but in action, not in safety, but in struggle, brick by brick, thought by thought, decision by decision. And when you look back, when you stand at the summit of your own becoming, you'll realize it was never about proving anyone wrong. It was about becoming someone you respect, someone you trust, someone no fear can control, no doubt can paralyze, and no failure can define. Because you are the builder, you are the warrior, you are the storm, and your fortress, your mind, your mission, your legacy is rising. It will not fall. It will not fade. It will not bow, because it was built by you. And now that you've built the walls, now that your mind stands stronger, clearer, louder than the voices of doubt, it's time to fill that fortress with vision. Because what good is strength without direction? What good is a fortified mind if it doesn't know where it's going? Vision is not a fantasy. It is not a dream scribbled on the edge of a notebook. It is the blueprint for every action, the map that makes your pain make sense. It gives meaning to the discipline, purpose to the sacrifice, fire to the focus. And the most dangerous man in any room is not the one with the loudest voice. It's the one with the clearest vision. You can feel it in how they move. You can see it in their eyes, unshaken, unwavering, not because they haven't been tested, but because they've already seen the outcome. They've already tasted the future, and that future calls them louder than their fears ever could. That's what makes a vision unbreakable. Not because it's big, but because it's real to you before it's real to anyone else. So define it, see it, speak it, write it in detail, feel the weight of it in your bones. Because what the mind rehearses in clarity, the body will execute in certainty. This is why vague goals never stand the test of resistance. Doubt needs ambiguity to grow. But a clear vision, specific, burning, personal, kills doubt where it stands. And when your vision is fortified, everything else begins to align. The distractions lose their appeal. The opinions lose their power. The excuses lose their grip. Because your vision becomes the new gravity, pulling every thought, every decision, every second of your life toward one singular truth. You are becoming who you were meant to be, not in some far-off future, but now, because purpose is not discovered, it's chosen. You don't find it like treasure buried in the dirt. You claim it through action, through clarity, through courage. And that's when the magic begins, not the mystical kind, but the kind that moves through your bloodstream when your days are ordered by vision, not reaction. The kind that makes 4:30 a.m. alarms feel like invitations, not burdens. The kind that turns "I have to" into "I get to." The kind that transforms your identity from "I hope I can" into "I will because I must." Because when your life is powered by vision, discipline becomes a joy, not a punishment. You stop waiting for the perfect mood to take action. You start acting and let your mood catch up. You train when you're tired. You focus when you're frustrated. You show up when the world says rest because your vision doesn't clock out. And make no mistake, discipline is not deprivation. Discipline is devotion, devotion to your future self, devotion to the calling that will not let you settle, devotion to the truth that comfort is the greatest sedative of potential and discomfort is the birthplace of power. So choose your pain wisely. The pain of discipline now or the pain of regret forever, because either way you will suffer. But one leads to growth, the other leads to decay. And the fortified mind, it doesn't fear pain. It chooses the pain that leads somewhere. It doesn't fear struggle. It embraces struggle as proof that it's still in the game. Because when you're comfortable, when everything's easy, you stop growing. But pressure, pain, resistance, those are signs you're still alive in the arena, still becoming, still dangerous. And that's where you want to live. Not on the sidelines, not in the stands watching others play the game you were born to win, but in it. Bruised, exhausted, doubted, but in it. That's what legacy demands. Because legacy isn't built in one moment of glory. It's carved over decades of unseen effort, shaped in the shadows, forged in the fire of daily, thankless, relentless discipline. And most will never know what it took. They'll see the results, the wealth, the success, the reputation, but they'll never see the early mornings, the lonely nights, the quiet tears, the internal battles. They'll never see the years you spent holding the line when everything in you said quit. But you'll know, and that knowledge, that private knowing, that's everything. That's the reward that can't be bought. Because while the world praises the outcome, the fortified mind celebrates the process of becoming, of breaking the chains of mediocrity, of choosing a higher standard every single time it was easier to fall back. That's who you are now. Not perfect, not finished, but fortified. And fortification is not a final form, it's a lifestyle. Every day you reinforce it. Every day you refine it. Every day you declare, this is who I am now. Because the world doesn't give you your identity, you decide it. And you decide it again and again with every thought, every belief, every action that either builds your future or buries it. So build. Build even when it's hard. Build especially when it's hard. Because the hard days are the test. And if you pass enough tests, you become the person others thought was a myth, focused, free, fire-breathing, future-led. And that person, that's who the world's been waiting for. Not a hero in a cape, not a guru on a mountaintop, but a man or woman who stared down doubt, walked through fear, and became the living proof that greatness isn't a gift. It's a grind. So let the others doubt. Let them mock. Let them quit. You You build. You build because your future is not a place you stumble into. It's a place you construct moment by moment, breath by breath, forged through choices that no one else sees but that change everything. You build because the war isn't out there. It's in here, in your mind, your emotions, your habits, and every time you choose discipline over distraction, every time you choose focus over frenzy, every time you choose purpose over panic, you win. Not a headline victory, a soul victory. The kind that stacks, the kind that compounds, the kind that over time transforms you into something no storm can move. And let me tell you something else. The most dangerous kind of doubt, it's not loud, it's subtle. It whispers. It tells you to wait until tomorrow. It says you've done enough. It masks itself as logic, reason, even self-care. But it's rot. It's a slow erosion of the very discipline that's trying to lift you out of mediocrity and into mastery. And if you listen to it long enough, you don't even know you're crumbling. You smile. You post. You go through the motions. But inside, you're retreating. So hear me clearly, this war will not be won by accident. It will not be won by inspiration alone. It will only be won by decisive action backed by unyielding commitment, because that's what it takes to build a fortress. Not walls of stone, but walls of identity, of standard, of non-negotiable belief. And you reinforce those walls every time you make the hard choice. Every time you speak truth over your fear. Every time you do the work, especially when you don't feel like it. Because the work doesn't just change the result. It changes you. It carves something eternal into your soul. It hardens your will, sharpens your mind, reprograms the internal narrative from "I hope I can" to "try and stop me." And once that switch flips, once that internal furnace burns hotter than any external pressure, you become untouchable. Not because life gets easier, but because you got harder to kill. Resilient, adaptable, calm in chaos, focused in frenzy, anchored when the tide rages. This is not theory. This is survival. This is leadership. Because the world is not looking for more noise. It's looking for anchors. People who don't fold at the first sign of trouble. People who don't sell their soul for comfort. People who stand when others run. Who choose mission over mood. Who stare down the void and say, "Not today. I am not done." And maybe you've never had someone speak that into you. Maybe you've been surrounded by average, by people who mock ambition because it reminds them of what they gave up. Maybe you've had to shrink to survive, to soften your truth to make others feel safe. But hear this, that is over. You are no longer available for smallness. You are no longer interested in surviving the world's low expectations. You are here to create new ones, to lead, not follow, to build, not beg, to rise, not rot. And the only way to do that is to keep choosing discomfort over distraction, to make your habits louder than your hope, to make your execution louder than your excuses, to make your identity louder than your doubt. That's what mental fortification means. It's not just resilience, it's rebirth. Rebirth of a self that cannot be seduced by the softness of the world, a self that wants the hard road, because the hard road makes you worthy of the dream. So the question is not, how do I silence the doubt? The question is, what will I build in spite of it? Because doubt doesn't disappear. It evolves. But so can you. You evolve by proving through repetition that you are not your fear. You evolve by rejecting the need for permission. You evolve by acting like your future depends on you, because it does. And in time you stop needing to fight the doubt. It's still there, still whispering, still trying, but it no longer matters, because your discipline is louder, your belief is deeper, your action is undeniable. You become the proof. You become the one others watch when they begin to doubt. And that's when you know you've transcended the struggle, not because the struggle is gone, but because it no longer owns you, because now you own it. You wield it like a sword. You shape it into strength. You use it as raw material to fortify your soul, because your dream is not a wish, it's a command, and you answer it not once, but every single day, until the day your vision becomes reality, not because you shouted louder, but because you built deeper, And the world will ask, how did you do it? And you'll say, I built a mind no doubt could enter. I built a standard no failure could lower. I built a life that could not be broken because I could not be. And what you built wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't luck. It wasn't handed down from above. It was earned in the hours no one saw, in the moments no one applauded, in the silence where doubt screamed loudest, but you didn't flinch because you knew something no one else could see. You knew that life wasn't testing your talent. It was testing your threshold. How much pressure could you take before you cracked? How long could you walk alone before you begged for company? How much rejection could you eat before you started to question your own taste? Every day you kept going, you answered with grit. Every time you wanted to retreat but advanced instead, you answered with courage. Every second you held your ground when your mind told you to run, you answered with power. And that power, it compounds, it makes you dangerous in the best way. Not because you're reckless, but because you're undeniable, unshakable, unwilling to betray your destiny just to feel safe for a moment. Because you learned something essential, something they don't teach in schools, something success gurus rarely tell you. You don't overcome doubt by pretending it's not there. You overcome doubt by outlasting it, by standing still when it tries to push you, by acting boldly when it whispers fear, by building so obsessively, so ferociously, that even your weakest day becomes stronger than most people's peak. And that's what separates the few from the many. Not talent, not luck, not opportunity.
But
a mind so forged by adversity, so fed by clarity, so fixed on vision that it cannot be moved. A mind that has made peace with pain, because pain is no longer the enemy. It's the ally, the mentor, the refiner. Because every great man and woman who ever lived, every Lincoln, every Mandela, every Carnegie, every Tesla, they all walked through fire, but they didn't just survive. They transformed. And now it's your turn. Your name may never be printed in textbooks, but that doesn't mean you weren't meant to lead. You weren't born to be a footnote in someone else's story. You were born to author your own, to plant your flag in the soil of your own becoming, to build a kingdom within your mind so powerful, so purposeful, so aligned with who you were called to be, that the world cannot help but feel your weight. But don't expect applause. Don't expect a round of cheers when you start saying no to mediocrity. Don't expect support when you start climbing out of the cage they made comfortable. Because growth offends those who stopped growing. Discipline confronts those who gave up on their own. And every time you rise, you will remind others of what they buried. But that is not your burden. You were not made to dim so others could feel tall. You were made to rise. And your rising is permission, not just for you, but for everyone watching. So own that weight. Wear it like armor. Let it shape you into a living monument of what it means to believe without evidence, to move without permission, to choose destiny over doubt, daily, because that's the real secret. Success isn't a destination, it's a consequence of thousands of unseen choices, of waking up when no one asked you to, of grinding when no one believed in you, of pushing when nothing seemed to move, of believing again when yesterday nearly broke you. That's the cost, and that's the gift. Because there is no strength without resistance. There is no power without pressure. There is no greatness without pain. And if you want the crown, you must bear the weight. But once you do, once you stop running, once you stand tall, once you declare with every fiber of your being that this is who you are now, nothing can stop you. Not doubt, not failure, not fear, because none of them can breathe in the altitude of a fortified mind. They die in the oxygen of your resolve, and every step you take from that moment on isn't just a step toward success. It's a step into your true nature, not the version they expect, not the version that fits in, but the version that commands rooms with silence, that shakes the ground with presence, that bends reality with conviction. That becomes the example the next generation points to when they wonder what's possible. So keep walking, keep climbing, keep building, and when the storms come, and they will, you won't panic, you won't break, you won't retreat, because you know what lives inside you now. You know what you've built, a fortress, a fire, a force, a mind that does not fall.